In this module, we're talking about student motivation. On screen, you'll see a number of motivations that students might bring with them to the classroom or might find along the way. Learning is not just a cognitive process, it's also an affective one. The motivations that students have or find will, in a large way, determine their success in our STEM programs. And so, as instructors, it's important that we attend to student motivation and do what we can to kind of foster the motivations that will lead to students being successful. Now, you can see a lot of different kinds of motivations on the screen right now, and in fact, our students do bring a variety of motivations. Their motivations might not be the ones that we had when we were in their position, and so it's important to think about the different kinds of motivations that students have. The research on student motivation tends to categorize most of them in these kind of broad categories: intrinsic motivations and extrinsic motivations. Intrinsic motivations are the ones that we kind of bring with us, a love of learning, interest in mastering a subject, the reward that comes at the end of something like that. Extrinsic motivations are external to us: grades, parental pressures, the job or the graduate school that we'll get when we're done with the program. The thing about intrinsic motivations is they tend to be more powerful, but a little less under our ability to influence as instructors. Extrinsic motivations tend to be a little less powerful, but again, we can actually generally control those fairly well. When we say something like, "This will be on the test," or "If you want to get an A in this course, here's what you need to do," we're activating those extrinsic motivations. Now, Ken Bain has this book, What the Best College Teachers Do, and he talks about this literature on motivation and makes the claim that these two different kinds of motivations generate certain types of learning behaviors in students. He calls one type of behavior strategic learning. These are the extrinsically motivated students who are typically either after a certain grade or scared of getting a certain kind of grade. Either way, they tend to fall back in what Ken Bain calls strategic learning behaviors. They will do just enough to get that grade or avoid that grade, but no more. They might not learn very deeply. They might not learn in a way that will help them solve problems when they leave the course. They'll do what they need to kind of navigate the course itself and get whatever external reward that they want. Ken Bain contrasts these students with deep learners. These are the students who are interested in learning, maybe not for its own sake, but at least they're interested in mastering the learning, figuring out what they can take from this course to solve problems down the way, to use in future courses or their careers. This is the kind of deep learning that we'd really like students to be able to develop. The problem is that it's really hard work. Deep learning requires a fairly high level of motivation, and often that means intrinsic motivations. So the challenge for us as instructors, I think, is how can we try to foster some of those intrinsic motivations to motivate students towards the kind of deep learning that we'd like them to have. Now, there's a few tools in the literature that I think we can use. And so I'm quoting a lot from Ryan and Desi here. They've got a really nice summary of some of the research on student motivation. They point to a few different factors that are at play with intrinsic motivations. One is this idea of competence. So the visual here is of a puzzle, and I have a young daughter, and she's kind of attuned to the size of a puzzle piece in a box of a puzzle that she might get, and how many pieces there are in that. If there's too few pieces, and if the pieces are too big, it's not very interesting to her anymore. But if there's too many pieces or the pieces are too small, it's a little too challenging for her, and she doesn't want to do that either. She's looking for something that's kind of just right. And that's the idea behind competence. We're motivated when we're engaging in tasks that are hard but not too hard. If it's too hard, we disengage, we get frustrated. If it's too easy, it's not interesting enough. And so this is one piece of the puzzle, I think, so to speak, that we can use to try to structure some more motivation in students. There's also the idea of autonomy. This, again, is a photo from my kids. I know when my daughter got her bike with the training wheels and she could kind of go off and have a little bit of autonomy, direct her own path, she was really excited. And that's what the research on motivation says, that when we have a certain degree of autonomy, we're more motivated to engage in whatever the activity is. We don't really like it when people are telling us exactly what to do. We want to have some choice, some free will in that, and that's a motivating factor. A third category is this idea of purpose. We're motivated when we know why it is we're doing what we're doing and what the end is. What's the goal? What can I do with this? Students don't always know quite precisely why they're taking a particular math or science or engineering course. They take it because the major requires it and they're there, but they're not quite sure what it's good for. I'll often talk about students trying to help them understand in a math course what they can do with the math. What kind of problems can it help them solve? What are they going to do with this when they finish the course? That's tapping into this idea of purpose so that they know kind of what it is that they're all about. More recent research looks at some other aspects of motivation, what I would call social motivations. There was a study by Binkler and Nissenbaum that came out a few years ago that looked at different groups of individuals, but one of the groups I know they looked at were contributors to Wikipedia. So these were people who frequently made edits or contributions to Wikipedia. And the researchers were interested to know, why did these folks participate in Wikipedia when there wasn't any real financial reward for doing so? And what they found was, among the Wikipedians and other groups as well, is that people are strongly motivated by being part of a community and by contributing and sharing with that community. And so the image here, I'm drawing a lot for my kids here. This is one of my kids' soccer teams in action. And I think, you know, our classrooms aren't necessarily, well, they're not soccer teams, and they're not necessarily learning communities either, but they can be. And when we start to help students see their classmates as people they can learn from and learn with, we're tapping into this idea of building a learning community. And again, that's going to motivate students to engage. I like to think that I may have trouble motivating my students to want to know math, but they might actually like the learning process. They might like learning with these people, and that's something that we can use to our advantage.